On a mild evening in May 1899, a pony trap rolled back toward a lonely farmhouse near Clavering in Essex. Only one of the two people who had set out in it was visible. The woman who had ridden away just a short time earlier, Camille Cecile Holland, was not beside the man who returned. She would never be seen alive again. For the next 4 years, the isolated property known as Moat Farm kept its secret, while the man at its center carried on as though nothing extraordinary had happened. To understand why this case gripped the public so strongly, it helps to picture late Victorian Essex. This was a world of market towns, country roads, church communities, and reputations that mattered deeply. A woman living independently still faced real social vulnerability, even if she had money of her own. Camille Holland was 56 years old, unmarried, and by the standards of the time, independent. She lived in Elgin Crescent in London and managed stocks and shares said to be worth about £6,000. In other words, she was not helpless, but she was also the kind of woman a skilled manipulator might notice very quickly. Samuel Herbert Dougal was that manipulator. He was about 4 years younger than Holland and had once enjoyed a respectable career in the Royal Engineers, rising to the position of chief clerk. He had spent years in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and by the time he entered Holland's life, he could present himself as worldly, capable, and reliable. But the record behind him was troubling. His first 2 wives had died in quick succession in Canada, though this case did not legally turn on those deaths. After leaving the army in 1887, his life became increasingly unstable, and in 1895 he was convicted of forgery and sentenced to 12 months hard labor, spending part of that time in an asylum after a reported suicide attempt. Whatever image he projected, Dougal was already a man with a record of deception. In January 1899, Holland and Dougal moved to the Saffron Walden area to take possession of a property near Clavering called Coldham's Farm. It had been selected by Dougal, but it was paid for by Holland, and she insisted that it remain in her name. Before moving in, they stayed with Mrs. Wiskin in Market Row, Saffron Walden, presenting themselves to the world as Mr. and Mrs. Dougal, even though they were not in fact married. On 22 April 1899, they moved into the farm, which they renamed Moat Farm. The name would become infamous. Soon after, a young maid named Florence Havies arrived to work at the farm. Almost immediately, according to the later account, she became uncomfortable with Dougal's behavior. On 14 May, he made improper advances to her in the kitchen, and on the night of 16 May, he tried to enter her room. Florence resisted. She screamed for help, and Holland came to her aid. For the rest of that night, and the next 2 nights, Holland and Florence slept in the same room. That detail matters because it suggests that by mid-May, Holland had reason to feel uneasy inside her own home. Then came the evening of 19 May, 1899. At about 6:30, Dougal and Holland went out together in a pony and trap. At about 8:30, Dougal returned alone. When Florence asked where Holland was, he said she had gone to London and would return later. He came and went through the evening, then around 12:45 in the morning he told Florence that Holland had still not returned and that she should go to bed. When Florence came downstairs at 7 the next morning, she found Dougal already up, dressed, and eating breakfast. He claimed he had received a letter from Holland saying she had gone away on holiday. Florence's mother arrived that morning, and Florence left the farm. That was the last ordinary morning before the mystery began in earnest. What followed is one of the most chilling parts of the story, not because it is graphic, but because it is so calm. Dougal remained at Moat Farm. He employed another maid. Another woman joined him and was presented as Mrs. Dougal, though she was actually his 3rd wife. Over the next 4 years, he moved about the local community, attended church, gave money to causes such as churchyard enlargement and interior redecoration, and generally behaved like a settled local man. But the question hung in the air. How could a man with no obvious means of support afford such generosity? That question began to receive a serious answer in 1903. In March of that year, Dougal was charged with forging and uttering a check for £28.15, purporting to be drawn by Camille C. Holland. During the proceedings, evidence suggested that he had systematically transferred money from Holland's accounts into his own, sold her stocks and shares, and even moved title to Moat Farm out of her name. According to later accounts, scrutiny from other legal and personal disputes also helped renew attention on Holland's unexplained absence. By then, what had once been a quiet disappearance was becoming a matter for determined police inquiry. On 19 March 1903, police took possession of Moat Farm, and they did not merely visit, they effectively moved in. Contemporary reporting, quoted by the Essex Police Museum, says the officers searched the property while cooking for themselves and making their own beds there, with Detective Sergeant Scott even acting as cook. They searched the house, the outbuildings, the grounds, and the moat itself. It was exhausting work in cold conditions, and it drew enormous public attention. Reporters came, sightseers came, vendors sold food, souvenir postcards were bought. A murder investigation at a lonely farmhouse had become a public spectacle. At last, on 27 April 1903, the search succeeded. Human remains were found in a ditch connected to the moat. Holland's body, which had been in the ground for nearly 4 years, was laid out in the conservatory at Moat Farm for identification. Mrs. Wiskin and Holland's nephew, Ernest Legrand Holland, identified clothing and jewelry. A shoemaker identified Holland's shoes by the maker's name. Later examination by Professor Pepper of the Home Office and Doctors Storrs and Sprague concluded that Holland had been shot once in the head at close range. It was a careful, methodical reconstruction, built not on spectacle, but on patient work and recognizable details that had survived the years. Dougal was indicted at Shire Hall, Chelmsford, on 22 June 1903 for the murder of Camille Cecile Holland. The Crown's case was that on the evening of 19 May 1899, he had taken Holland out in the Pony and Trap, shot her, and buried her in a prepared grave on the farm. Witnesses included Mrs. Wiskin, Florence Blackwell, or Havies, as named in differing retellings, and several women who had known Dougal or had some connection to the farm. The trial was held before Mr. Justice Wright. After hearing the evidence, the jury retired and returned a verdict of guilty after 56 minutes. The judge put on the black cap and sentenced Dougal to death. On the morning of 14 July 1903, Samuel Herbert Dougal was executed at Chelmsford Prison. He was buried within the prison grounds. In legal terms, the case was solved. In human terms, it leaves a quieter ache. Camille Holland had entered the story as a financially independent woman, making her own choices. And yet she was still vulnerable to a practiced deceiver who understood how to exploit trust, appearances, and isolation. The triumph in this case was not dramatic heroism. It was persistence. The insistence that a woman who had vanished from public view had not simply drifted away, and that her absence deserved an answer. And that is why the Moat Farm murder still lingers in memory. The broad outline is known. Dougal was convicted. Camille Holland's disappearance was finally explained by the work of investigators and witnesses who refused to let the matter rest. But one part remains forever closed to us, the final private moments of that evening in May 1899. The road, the trap, the isolated farm, and the lie that followed are all that history can firmly hold. The rest is silence, and a warning from another age about charm, trust, and the danger of being alone with the wrong man.